Hello, and thanks for joining us in this talk. My name is Chao Yilu. I'm a postdoc at Tsinghua University. Unfortunately, the authors couldn't join us in here, so I'll be presenting this work on their behalf. We'll look at a very classic and special type of resource records in the domain name system, which is the glue records. And they're almost as old as the DNS itself, but in practice, we'll discuss how they may become mismanaged, misused, and finally lead to security threats such as malicious takeover. And first, some concepts and summary. Glue records, they essentially tell people about IP addresses of authoritative servers of domain names. And we define stale glue records as those pointing to invalid nameserver IPs, and thus the servers won't correctly resolve the domains in question. And surprisingly, we find actually a quarter of all glue records are stale. And further, these stale records can be awakened under a specific threat model, and over 6 million domains will be at risk of takeover or resolution errors as a result. A callback on the DNS or the domain name system, it primarily translates domain names to IP addresses and serves as the start of almost every internet activity, like web browsing, email, and more. So when a domain needs to be resolved, our client sends a query to a recursive resolver, which in turn queries different levels of authoritative servers for a final answer, like root servers, top-level domains, second-level domains, and more. And at each level, authoritative servers will tell the resolver where to query next. This is enabled through some data called delegation records, stored in the parent zone, information about their direct child domains. And for example, the top-level domain .com will need to store some information for the second-level domain, like example.com's authoritative servers. And depending on the relationship of child domains and their authoritative servers, there are three formats of delegation data. And first is in-domain delegation. You see in this example, the authoritative server for full.com, it's under itself. And next is sibling delegation. Authoritative server for full.com is under something called exam.com, but they're both under .com, the same top-level domain, so siblings. And finally, there is out-domain delegation. At this time, full.com uses some authoritative server under full.net under a different top-level domain. And now to the target of this work today, what are glue records? And glue records are a part of delegation data which solves one specific problem under the in-domain scenario. So when resolving this domain full.com, the resolver has asked the root server and .com server already. And now the .com server returns delegation data, an NS-type record specifying that ns1.full.com is the next authoritative server for you to query. So what if this is the only record in this delegation data? The resolver should resolve ns1.full.com to its IP address in order to query the server. But remember our domain in question. In this case, we need to resolve some domain under foo.com to get the answer of foo.com itself. So this causes a loop, and foo.com will never be resolved as a result. And here it comes, glue records. And essentially, it points authoritative servers to their IP addresses. So when there's in-domain delegation, glue records are also stored and provided by the parent together with NS records of child domains. So this time, this loop will be solved. Resolvers will know from the parent where ns1.foo.com is and eventually gets answers for foo.com from it. So now we know that glue records are important, particularly for in-domain delegation. And they're not new either, almost as old as the DNS itself. But we seem to overlook problems associated with ever since. Why? Because standards have said that glue records are only expected to be used in referral responses to guide resolvers. They themselves may not become DNS answers or used in other cases other than in-domain delegation. And as a result, in some DNS software, we can see that glue records have very low rank in terms of priority and usage. So we generally think they barely cause problems. So in this work, let's find out. Are glue records properly managed by domain holders and used by DNS software? We'll show soon that not really. A lot of glue records are found stale, meaning that they cannot provide information to the domains in question. Also, some DNS software goes against standard recommendations and will use glue records outside the in-domain scenario. We first see how glue records are currently managed. From a collection of over 1,000 top-level domains, we extracted all glue records from their zone files. It's easy because they're the only address records in the top-level domain zone files. And eventually, we find about 2 million of them. And then we categorize the glue records into 3 major types. And the first is correct ones. The delegation data in the parent agrees with that in the zone files of child domains, and these are perfectly fine. And next are stale glue. Parent and child indicates the same authoritative server name for this domain, but the IP addresses in the glue records disagrees. A result of this is the resolver will get delegation data and will go to the IP address indicated by the parent, which might be false according to the child's authoritative. And finally, expired glue. These have been canceled by the child's authoritative, but for some reason still stays in the zone file of the parent. So again, upon receiving this delegation from parent, the resolver may go to servers out of the child's control. And under proper management, stale and expired glue should never appear, and as they provide false information to resolvers. And by checking all the glue records, we actually surprisingly find that a significant number mismanaged glue. Over 20% of them are stale, and about 30% of domain names in them are non-existent or inactive. And we also find that glue records may not only serve the in-domain scenario per its initial design, as only less than 0.3% of domains have in-domain delegation currently. So now we have a lot of mismanaged, stale, or expired glue that provides false or invalid delegation. So the other part of the story is DNS software misuse these glue records during DNS lookups, particularly without verifying their authenticity. They might go to the malicious servers, and security risks will then appear. And to begin with, we suppose there has been a cached glue record for an authoritative server like ns.foo.com in the cache. This could be obtained during previous lookups or injected deliberately, as we will show later. Now, say we have a foo.net whose authoritative server is this ns.foo.com, typical out-domain delegation. So during recursive queries for foo.net, a new glue for ns.foo.com will be provided by the top-level domain. The resolver now faces 2 options. Ignore the cached glue and trust this new glue it'll get, or use the cached glue in order to speed up and save 1 round trip. So problems arise when the data in the cache and data returned by the top-level domain differs. Resolvers can be directed to different servers as a result. Note that from standards, using the cached glue for this out-domain scenario is not recommended. However, we find several mainstream software is actually doing this, caching and using this glue without validation, even under out-domain scenarios, and when cached glue records are designed to have low priority of trust. So one last question for the attacker: how to deliberately inject glue records into the resolver cache that disagrees with authentic data and causes security problems. So in this paper proposed the attack model called shadow caching, which leverages stale glue records already presented in the zone files. And suppose we find a stale glue record for like vulner.com. The addresses here, 192.1.1.1, is not in use as authoritative of a domain anymore, but somehow still exists in the parent. And the victim domain uses authoritative server under this vulner.com. So what an attacker will do is register its own domain and configure a sibling delegation to this vulner.com. And later, by querying the attacker domain, the stale glue of vulner.com will be cached by a resolver during its lookups. And finally, attacker may take over the IP address in the stale glue records. If resolvers are implemented to trust the cached glue without verification, then queries for the victim domain will go to the attacker's server. And in the meantime, when the address in stale glue records cannot be taken over, attackers may also cause denial of service for the victim domain. This is because servers in stale glue records are invalid, and they may not respond to DNS queries of the victim domain, causing lookup failures. And as a result, the DNS software will treat the authoritatives as stale and leading to considering the victim domain has been experiencing problems and eventually refusing to resolve it. And through evaluation, we find a large number of domains are actually susceptible to takeover or denial of service because of their stale glue records. And 20% of these domains are even ranked top 1 million by the Tranquil Top sites. And also, we find several mainstream DNS software and public DNS services are vulnerable due to their misuse of glue records. And we have disclosed these risks to all affected vendors. And among the top-level domain registries, .info and .org have confirmed the mismanagement issue and are clearing up the stale glue records from their zone files. And 4 DNS software and public DNS service vendors have confirmed this issue, but some report significant complexity in fixing it. And we recommend more transparent and strict configuration of glue records to mitigate mismanagement, as well as correct misuse of glue under out-domain scenarios by DNS software. So to sum up, this work discusses mismanagement and misuse of glue records and security risks caused by them together. We show that under this threat model, millions of domains can be hijacked or be refused to resolve. And dozens of domain registries, DNS software, and public DNS services are susceptible, and we provide recommendations to more secure usage of glue records. And that's it for this talk. Thank you.